that really have no background or substantiation. Our colleagues across the aisle are spending the time in this House to create a special interest carve-out for a giant multinational corporation. It's, by the way, owned by people outside the United States. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time's expired. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to another gentleman who has been a long-time supporter of this project, Mr. Flake.
Gentleman from Arizona.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. You know, listen to the debate, you wonder what bill we're debating here. The opposition seems to be talking about something completely different. We've heard under the rule debate yesterday and some of the debate today that this won't create any jobs in Arizona, that somehow these jobs will go to robots. I mean, come on, this isn't the Jetsons doing this. I mean, I have no idea what's being talked about here. Let me just give you a couple of examples of those who are employed currently. There are 500 people currently employed by resolution on the mine. 500. 90% of them are Arizonans. 90% of the 500 right now. There are estimated 1,400 jobs directly related to the mine or directly in the mine, and some 3,700 beyond that, ancillary jobs that come as a result of it. Albo Guzman, he's a local Superior trading contractor. He has several local employees working for him on this project. That's a person, not a robot. Jeb Domlin, a Globe-based contractor whose company is doing much of the reclamation work on the project. Elizabeth Magallanes, she's a longtime resident. She was actually born in the hospital that was run by the company on the previous mine that her father worked on, the Magma project. That company hospital now serves as the project's headquarters. 2 of her sons work for a Resolution contractor. Mike Alvarez, 3rd generation from Superior, works as a map technician. These are all real people, not robots. You didn't hear me say C-3PO or anybody like that. So these arguments that we hear coming out of the opposition on this are just complete nonsense about this not creating jobs. And this talk about royalties, if we want to go in and change the Mining Act of 1872, let's do it. I'll be there. A lot of us have argued for that. But this is not the place to address the Mining Act of 1872. Let's address that when it should be addressed, and let's address the facts at hand. And the facts are these. Jobs will be created. This is a great bill. Let's pass it.
Time's expired. Gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my friend, Mr. Flake. You're right. This isn't the Jetsons doing this. I probably feel a lot more comfortable if that was the case. But given the time we have left, I'll reserve the balance of my time, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chairman, how much time on both sides?
11 and a half and 6.
9 and a half?
11.
11 and a half. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield I have another speaker coming to the floor, so I'll yield myself as much time as I may consume.
That was recognized.
Mr. Chairman, we have heard some curious arguments on the other side, as my colleagues on this side have pointed out a few times. But let me just talk about a couple of them where there's a charge that this will cost the taxpayers. We measure what the costs are to the taxpayers of this country by the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO. And CBO, in looking at the land exchange aspect of this and the other costs associated, have concluded that the cost to the taxpayer is effectively zero. Now, that's the official agency that we go by. So when we hear that there are a whole bunch of costs associated with that, to the taxpayer, that's simply not so. But what is even more ironic, Mr. Chairman, when they make that argument, they ignore the fact that jobs that will be created here get paid wages. Those wages then will be subjected to tax policies of our federal government to where the federal government actually gets more revenue. But that is ignored, it seems like, all the time when we hear the other side argue on this issue. Let me talk about the issue of NEPA, because that has been bandied around a few times. The NEPA laws of our country are not changed at all by the passage of this bill. But what we do is we put logic to the process. Mr. Chairman, as you know very well, our great government was designed to have a dispersion of power. We sit in the legislative branch and we make the policy of this country, and the executive branch carries out that policy. It's been that way since our republic was founded. All we are saying is that when Congress directs an action, in this case an action of a land exchange, it shall not be subject to NEPA, because we are exercising our authority under the Constitution to direct policy. Why should a NEPA policy be used to slow down a direction that Congress has given? So that's the only part of the NEPA policy that we are affecting in this bill. Now, I want to say this very explicitly. Under this bill, all NEPA laws as to the construction and the carrying on of this mine will be subject to NEPA laws, and nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. So when people throw around NEPA as something that one reason why we shouldn't adopt this, that is simply a bogus argument. And finally, I just want to make one more point here about this being a giveaway. In fact, there are some of my persuasion that may have a bit of heartburn with this, because as a matter of fact, we are giving the federal government more land than we are exchanging for private development of this copper land. And Mr. Chairman, I know you've heard the arguments over this in the time you and I have been here, and yet this is something that I think is worthy of support, because we do want to make sure that those lands are protected in a way. So to suggest that there's a giveaway here is simply not the case, because the exchange is of equal value. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves, gentleman from Arizona.
Speaker, I continue to reserve our time.
Gentleman reserves, gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I am very pleased to yield to a former member of the Natural Resources Committee, a gentleman from New Mexico, 3 minutes.
Gentleman from New Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the gentleman from Washington for yielding. Every day in my district in New Mexico, people ask, what's gone wrong with the American economy? What's gone wrong with the American economy is that the federal government spends $3.6 trillion a year, and it brings in $2.1 trillion a year. So they ask then, why are the revenues to the government down? I say, well, because jobs are down. And they want to know why jobs are down, and I can point to the resistance to this bill and explain why jobs are down. This is a very common sense bill. It says we're going to take land, almost twice as much land, and exchange it to a private company, from a private company. We'll give them half as much land and let them have a copper mine there. Now, the Americans are currently importing about 32% of all the copper that we use. This one mine, if the resistance were dropped and if were put into operation, would provide 25% of the domestic copper demand for the next 50 years. Why would we be contesting this? I've heard my friends on the other side of the aisle say it's because there are robots working in the mine. The mines I go in, and I will guarantee you this mine is going to be conducted with engineers, with mechanics. It's going to be conducted with blue-collar laborers down the hole working in the mine. They've got better machinery than they did 100 years ago. They're not there working with pick and shovel. But these are real jobs, 1,200 to 1,500 jobs long-term, 2,000 to 3,000 construction jobs. It's a $4 billion increase in our economy, and we can't get agreement. This town, which talks so much about jobs on both sides of the aisle, and we hear the President moving around the country, I haven't heard the President once come out and say, at least free up these 1,200 jobs. I will sign this jobs package. Instead, he wants to raise taxes to increase jobs. That's his idea. This is a private investment in a private land where they create a lot of long-term jobs. More than that, they make us self-sufficient. Now, the price of copper is almost 4 times what it was 10 years ago. The most recent report is that people are stealing copper bells off of churches and going in, cutting them up and selling them. Copper is in that great a demand, and we still find resistance from our friends on the other side of the aisle for creating these jobs, and no one seems to understand in the American public why. What is this about? It's about an agenda politics. It's about saying that we're not going to let any development of resources go in the West. The West has had its timber jobs choked off. It's had its mining jobs choked off. It has resistance to the oil and gas jobs, and there are people who are trying to shut that industry down. They're trying to shut the coal mining jobs down. The West is starving for jobs. And in fact, we in the Western Caucus have recently put out a report highlighting all of the many ways we could create jobs now. The Jobs Frontier. I would recommend that people go to it. This is one of the bills in the Jobs Frontier. I heartily recommend that we pass H.R. 1904 and yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I indicated, that much of the opposition is coming from Indian country to this legislation. All the pueblos, including 6 all the pueblos in New Mexico have opposed this legislation. All the Intertribal Council of Arizona is opposed to this legislation. 26 tribes from across the country, including Texas, have opposed this legislation. They see an impact on sacred sites, history, and culture that has not been factored into this discussion, nor have Native peoples, particularly those affected nearby, San Carlos, Apache, been allowed to run what is important, which is the government-to-government consultation. Just a point, the chairman, my friend of the Natural Resources Committee, mentioned CBO score for this bill. There are also 2 points to make. The CBO says this bill could cost the taxpayers up to $5 billion over 10 years. This cost is not offset. CBO says the payments to government could be significant, but the bill's provisions don't allow CBO to score them accurately. A straight royalty, for sure, would have certainty and would return what was needed, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Before I yield to another gentleman from Arizona, I just respond that CBO also said in their scoring that it's so insignificant it's hard to measure. With that, Mr. Chairman, I am pleased to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Schweiker.
Gentleman from Arizona.
Mr. Chairman, this is one of those moments where I ran out of the Financial Services committees where we were voting because I thought it was important, being an Arizonan, but also spending lots of time in this part of the state, which is a beautiful part of the state. And much of these little communities are there have devastating unemployment. And they're literally furious with Washington, D.C. for destroying their timber jobs and squeezing their mining jobs. And then we stand here with something that for a little state like Arizona could be billions and billions of dollars of economic growth. When you think about this one ore deposit could represent 20% of the nation's copper, how can we even be debating this? When you also realize, what is it, an average single-family home uses about 440 pounds of copper. Well, do you want housing? Well, how about a car? A car uses about 55 pounds of copper. This is where it will come from. And the last thing I want to say, and to my good friend, Congressman Gosar from northern Arizona, and actually from all over Arizona, he's...
The gentleman, 30 seconds.
Recognized.
He's deserving of a gigantic thank you here. To be a freshman congressman, to step into this body, to deal with what ultimately is sometimes a cantankerous issue, but incredibly important to the nation, to the Southwest, and to those of us that live and love Arizona. This is important. This is a lot of jobs. This is a lot of economic growth, and Congressman Gosar gets a lot of credit for getting it this far. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back my time.
Gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Grijalva.
Yeah, may I inquire, Mr. Chairman, how much time each side has?
We're at 5 and 3.
I will, I'm going to be prepared to close, but I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to yield 1 minute to the sponsor of this legislation. Again, somebody who has been absolutely tenacious on this issue, gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gosar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My legislation shows you can protect the land and the water and have a strong economy with good jobs. The land exchange that will bring into federal stewardship 5,500 acres of high-priority conservation lands in exchange for the third largest undeveloped copper deposit in the world. I'd like to speak about one in particular. The 7B Ranch located in Pinal County. Arizona is 3,073 acres designated by the Nature Conservancy as one of the last great places on earth. And the Forest Service testified that this property was priceless. Here you get a chance to see some of them. This area is home to a free-flowing artesian spring-fed wetland populated by lowland leopard frogs, nesting birds, and native fish. In addition, this parcel is recognized by BirdLife International as an important bird area. These are amazing sites. These have priceless as their connotation. I yield back my time.
And yields back. Gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Grijalva.
Thank you. And let me just talk about the opposition. And it is not only with affection for the state that I grew up with and that I was born in, but it's also for the future of that state, and it's also for the future of important rules and laws that have protected our environment for many years, and to assure that the jobs that we're talking about are not just a panacea and a selling point as opposed to a reality. The opposition to this Rio Tinto Resolution Copper land exchange is based on many factors, but let me just point out two. This is the fourth version of the land exchange. Began with former colleague Renzi, then Mr. Pastor, Mr. Patrick, and now my friend Mr. Gosar from Arizona. They are not the same, none of those. And the one major difference is that, with the exception of the legislation before us, the NEPA process, the ESI, the consultation, all occurred before the land exchange, not after. Once we do that process, something comes up that needs compliance and mitigation, it becomes subject to the private property owner, a foreign company that will now have this public land, to deal with that question, as serious compliance issues and legal issues. The other point is the water. That 12 years have already been banked of the 20 that the mine would need in order to operate. The point being, in protecting Oak Flats and other very important areas in the water supply for the region, that seems like a significant number. But to bank water for this project on the outskirts of Phoenix does nothing to mitigate the potential usage of water, the potential drain of water in those three aquifers in that region, and the effect that it would have. NEPA would tell us what that effect would be. A full study would tell us what that effect it is. But we're not having that done, so the consequence is that we're working on supposition, and I think supposition on this major land exchange is a huge mistake. We cannot afford unintended consequences with this land deal, and a full and open process. If we would have done that at the initiation with the Renzi bill almost 8 years ago, we would be through that process many, many years ago, and we'd be perhaps talking about a differently crafted piece of legislation. We aren't doing that. And the last thing is there's something sacred and spiritual about this as well. Native people are not just complaining because they want to complain. They are legitimately saying that we need to have consultations, there should be full study, and factored into the decision-making must be the historical and cultural and sacred and religious sacred areas that we need protected and ensured that they will be protected. Those discussions have not occurred. HR, it's a land giveaway, and the gentleman from New Mexico said why our economy is in a bad place. Well, this kind of legislation tells you why. It is a sweetheart deal for a multinational corporation, foreign-owned. It gives them breaks.
Will the gentleman yield?
I've got 3 minutes, and I will be glad as soon as I'm done with my summation if I have time, sir. Thank you. But let me go over the points. This is jobs for robots. I know it's a touchy term with the colleagues on the other side of the aisle, but the reality is Rio Tinto is a pioneer in automation. They've done it in Australia. They've done it in other parts of the world. There is no reason to believe that that same pattern is not going to be applied to the mine that they own in Resolution. The sucking sound that we will be hearing will be the loss of water levels in that area and the effect it will have. And it's a caper. It's a copper caper using unusual appraisal procedures which do not guarantee that the company is going to pay any fair price for the billions of dollars of copper they stand to receive from the American people. And like I said earlier, something has to be sacred. H.R. 1904 trades away many sites that are sacred to Native people. We've received pleas from Indian country over and over again, and we should deal with those issues before the land exchange, not as this legislation has it, after. And insult to injury, we kept talking about jobs. There is an agenda before this Congress to begin to immediately create jobs for the American people. That is stalled and, as from what I hear from leadership, permanently derailed. And so as American people look for real employment and real opportunity, we present a false hope in this legislation, something that hasn't been vetted, and I urge opposition to the legislation, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Washington has 2 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, how much time do I have?
2.
I yield myself the balance of the time. Mr. Chairman, I just want to make 2 points in concluding debate before we go into the amendment process. And the reference was made to NEPA, and I responded to that just a bit earlier, where I simply said that there is a division of powers, and we are making an action. With passage of this legislation signed into law by the President, we have said that there will be a land exchange. That's the policy of the country. Now, anything that happens on that land after the exchange has happened is subject to NEPA review. I have absolutely no problem with that, and nothing in this bill changes that process. And the second point I'd want to make is on the issue of creation of jobs. Honestly, when you hear the debate here on the floor on this issue, that's probably emblematic of what the debate has been going on in this Congress since day one. Apparently, the other side thinks that the only way you can create jobs is raising taxes and expanding the public sector. We believe that the best way to create jobs and grow our economy are based on the principles that have gotten the United States from where we were when the Republic was created till now by relying on the private sector. This is a private sector investment on lands that create a tremendous amount of wealth. This is a job creator, and I think that this bill deserves passage. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. All time for general debate has expired. Pursuant to the rule, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. It shall be in order to consider as an original bill for the purpose of amendment under the 5-minute rule, the amendment in the nature of a substitute printed in the bill, modified by the amendment printed in Part A of House Report 112-258. That amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read. No amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute is in order, except those printed in Part B of the report. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report by a member designated in the report, shall be considered read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Mexico rise? Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 1, printed in Part B of House Report number 112-258, offered by Mr. Lujan of New Mexico.
Pursuant to House Resolution 444, the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Lujan, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And my amendment is significant but simple. My amendment does not kill this project. As offered, it simply asks the Congress to respect the religious and sacred sites of our tribal brothers and sisters. This bill does little, if anything, to offer protection to the sacred sites in the area, and does not offer true tribal consultation to the tribes. We all know that consultation occurs before, not after, decisions have already been made. The tribes in this area believe Resolution Copper's block cave mining method will have negative impacts to their sacred, cultural, and traditional sites in the area. Again, this amendment will not kill this project. It would show respect and offer protections to both surface and subsurface sites in the proposed land conveyance. More specifically, my amendment states that the federal land to be conveyed may not include any Native American sacred or cultural site, whether surface or subsurface. This amendment would merely offer a basic level of respect for many religious and cultural sites to the many tribes in the region. As our dear friend Congressman Kildee reminds us daily, we have a trust responsibility to our tribal brothers and sisters. And those who oppose this responsibility will dismantle it piece by piece with a scalpel and not all at once with an axe. This is what we're seeing today, Mr. Chairman. In its current form, H.R. 1904 would approve a federal land exchange to transfer ownership of 2,400 acres of land on the Tonto National Forest to Resolution Copper for the purposes of a block cave copper mine. The federal lands which are proposed to be the exchange, generally known as Oak Flat, are part of the ancestral lands of the San Carlos Apache tribe and other tribes in the region. These lands have unique religious, traditional, and archaeological significance to many tribes in southern Arizona. Behind me is a photo of one of those areas that's most sacred, Apache Leap. You've heard from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that their bill offers protection for sacred, traditional, and cultural sites in the proposed area to be exchanged, but I don't believe that to be true. If it were true, then why is every major tribal organization in the country opposing this bill? It's because they do not believe that these so-called protections to be real. Opposing organizations include, but are not limited to, the National Congress of American Indians, the United South and Eastern Tribes, the All-Indian Pueblo Council of New Mexico, the San Carlos Apache Tribe, the Jicarilla and Mescalero Apache Tribes of New Mexico, and many other tribes across the country. Mr. Chairman, all of these organizations and tribal leaders know that the degradation of these cultural sites means a loss of identity and culture, not to mention utter disrespect for the religion and history of the tribes connected to this area. Just to be clear, supporting my amendment will not kill the project. It would simply mean respecting and preserving the religious, cultural, and archaeological and historic significance of the lands that mean so much to the tribes in the region. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. For what purposes does the gentleman from Washington rise?
Mr. Chairman, I claim time in opposition.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, when I became chairman of the Committee on Natural Resources this last January, I established a new subcommittee on Indian and Alaska Native Affairs. The purpose was to ensure a special forum for the issues and concerns important to Indian tribes and Native people. I respect the views and special concerns of Indian tribes, and its importance that they have a role and are consulted in decisions that affect the people and on their reservation lands. This bill before the House today explicitly includes a section requiring government-to-government consultation. Section 4C, Mr. Chairman, of the bill is titled, and I quote, "Consultation with Indian Tribes," end quote. Consultation must occur before the mine operations ever begin. To repeat, the mine cannot happen without consultation with interested tribes. To be clear, the mine is a site that is not located on reservation land. The closest Native American reservation is the San Carlos Apache, located more than 20 miles east of the mine site. And it should be noted, too, that where this mine is proposed to be developed is right in the heart of what we call Arizona's historic copper triangle, right here. These orange dots here is where copper is mined or quarried right now. This is the proposed site of the mine. And the San Carlos Apache Reservation is up here. As you can see, there's activity between here and the San Carlos Reservation. The real effect of this amendment would be to allow the Department Secretary to veto and block the project on the subjective grounds that a previously identified cultural site exists on these lands. As stated previously, this is a geographic triangle that's historically home to numerous mines. I might add, too, Mr. Chairman, the Forest Service completed an environmental assessment in 2008, 3 years ago, in which, and I quote, "Several attempts were made to identify sacred sites and effects on ceremonial use of sacred sites," end quote. The official conclusion was a finding of no significant impact, and that finding was sustained on appeal. Furthermore, the terms Native American, sacred, and cultural in the amendment offered by my friend from New Mexico are undefined, and thus it cannot be predicted what effect this amendment would have. It opens the door to time-consuming litigation and subjective or political decisions. In the land exchange within the bill, environmentally sensitive and cultural important lands are given protection. Thousands more acres, as I alluded to earlier on, are added for the protection that are made available for the development of this mine. The ratio is roughly 2 to 1. The bill specifically and permanently, for example, protects Apache Leap. Because this bill ensures and requires tribal consultation before development of the mine, and because the real effect of the amendment would be for political mischief between the time of the mine operating, I urge my colleagues to vote no on the Lujan Amendment, and I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Directly now.
Mr. Chairman, not at this time. Mr. Chairman, look, just to be clear with this amendment, it does not kill the project. The amendment simply states that the Secretary will exclude sacred and cultural sites as identified by the Secretary. If we're serious about protecting sacred sites and respecting tribes across the country, I don't know why this is so complicated. And the only area in the legislation, as we look at Section 8 of the bill, talks about preserving and consulting with tribes about Apache Leap. But again, it's too little too late. It's consulting after the fact, not before the legislation is taken into effect. And so, Mr. Chairman, you know, if we were going to go into a site, say the cathedral in Santa Fe or the Vatican in Rome, and they were going to go and do something to that land, and they said, well, don't worry, we have some other land that we're going to give you. It's about the religious and sacred nature of these sites that we're talking about. At the very least, of its very essence, let's look to see what we can do to preserve the government-to-government trust responsibilities that we have with our tribes and respect those religious sites, respect those sacred sites, and see what we can do to work together collectively. Again, this isn't going to kill the project. Let's work together to make sure that we respect the tribes that we're so honored to represent here in the Congress. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to yield 45 seconds to the gentleman from New Mexico.
Gentleman from New Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the gentleman from New Mexico would answer a question, it's my understanding that we have rock climbers who are always out there, hikers up in there. That would be the equivalent to allowing people to rappel down the side of Washington Monument, but I've never heard an objection from anyone to exclude those kinds of activities, and so it comes across just a little bit strange that we would talk about limiting one activity while people are crawling and rappelling down these sites already. I yield back.
Gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Chairman, I understand the other side has yielded back to their time. How much time do I have left?
1 minute.
I am more than happy to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gosar.
Gentleman from Arizona.
Mr. Chairman, I find it very interesting that my opponent, our opponent on the other side, actually focuses a picture of Apache Leap, which is specifically excluded from this legislation. So therefore, when we talk about in regards to protecting the sites, we have done so. As far as the consultation is concerned, we have done consultations. No, I will not yield. When we were talking about
that's not in here.
That is Apache Leap.
The time is controlled by the gentleman from Arizona, and the chair would ask the gentleman from New Mexico to
The point of reference is that we cite all the native tribes. They are far from unison. In fact, during our conversation within the Resources Committee, former tribal chairman and 16-year tribal councilman Harrison Talgo testified that reducing the traditional Apache values are not mutually exclusive with economic development. Given that the San Carlos Apaches are one of the most impoverished tribes in the nation, with unemployment rates around 70% and poverty affecting every facet of tribal members' life, I couldn't agree more with Mr. Talgo. Mr. Talgo also points that Oak Flats, the campground in question, is a long way from the reservation. He also pointed out the majority of tribal members he speaks about in this project support this project. I yield back the balance of my time to the chairman.
Time's expired. All time's expired on the amendment. The question is now on the amendment. offered by the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Lujan. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Gentleman
Chairman,
from
has a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New Mexico will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 2, printed in Part B of House Report 112-258. For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise? Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 2, printed in Part B of House Report Number 112-258, offered by Mr. Markey of Massachusetts.
Pursuant to House Resolution 444, the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Markey, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Mr. Chairman, there are two versions of this land bill. One with the Markey Amendment, one without the Markey Amendment. The difference is the version with the Markey Amendment is a deal the American taxpayers should take. Without my amendment, this is a deal that takes the taxpayers. Without the Markey Amendment, this land deal is a shell game, all about misdirection and surprise outcomes. We are urged to keep our eye on the beautiful surface acres the federal government would get in this deal and the unique payment scheme included in the bill. This is like the guy on the street who tells you to watch his right hand while his left hand is picking your pocket. This is not about the surface. This is about the copper and whether Rio Tinto will have to pay its fair value. And the fact is, the payment scheme in this bill is completely, let me say it again, the payment scheme in this bill is completely speculative. It will be based on information only the company has access to and is subject to serious manipulation. In the end, Rio Tinto could end up paying absolutely nothing for the massive windfall they stand to receive with this legislation. With the Markey Amendment, this bill is simple. It would require no guesswork on the part of the taxpayers. It would allow for no manipulation that could shortchange the American taxpayer. My amendment strikes the convoluted payment scheme in this bill and replaces it with a simple 8% royalty on the copper produced each year from this mine. This is the American people's copper. It's not their copper, it's the American people's. What are they going to get out of this? How about 8%? Can we give the taxpayer 8%? Now, we don't know how much copper exactly is down there. The benefit of my amendment is we don't need to know ahead of time. If Rio Tinto makes $1, then they owe the taxpayer a nickel and 3 pennies, and if they make $8 billion, the U.S. Treasury gets $640 million. Now, the company will argue a royalty is unfair. Well, guess who is already paying royalties, Mr. Chairman? Oil and gas companies pay 12.5% when they drill on the taxpayers' land. 12.5%. That's what ExxonMobil pays. That's what Shell pays. But you know who else pays a royalty? Rio Tinto and BHP Billiton when they mine on state land. So if you're in Colorado, you're in Wyoming, you're on state land, you're paying a royalty. But now let's go to the American taxpayers' land. Those same companies that pay to the states don't pay to Uncle Sam. And the revenue from a royalty is money we can use. What can we use the money for? Make sure we don't have to cut Medicare payments for grandma. Make sure we have student loans for kids to be able to go to college. That's what the money can be used for. Should it just be pocketed by Rio Tinto, by these companies? So I asked my colleagues, which deal do you want to go home with and tell your constituents you will for? The deal where they got some nice land in Arizona while a foreign mining company got billions in copper, or the deal where they got the land plus hundreds of millions of dollars in royalty payments for the U.S. taxpayer? With the Markey Amendment, we in Congress are responsible stewards, doing our due diligence to protect the federal treasury to get the taxpayer what they're owed. Without the Markey Amendment, I will not yield. Without the Markey Amendment, this House looks like the old Keystone cops bumbling around in circles while billions walk right out the door that should be in the pockets of every taxpayer in this country. We have a super committee debating how much they're going to cut poor people, students, national defense, what we're going to spend on the protection of our country, how many policemen we can afford to have. Meanwhile, out here on the House floor, we're going to turn a blind eye to billions of dollars just going right off the floor of the House here today into the pockets of Rio Tinto, into the pockets of a foreign corporation. That's not wrong. That's not right, rather. Vote for the Markey Amendment. Capture this money for the American taxpayer.
Expired. Gentleman, for what purpose? Gentleman from Washington rise.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to this amendment.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in deference to my good friend from Massachusetts, there is only one bill before us, and that's a bill without the Markey Amendment, and I hope it stays that way. This amendment requires the company to pay for the minerals twice. The value of the copper is already included in the appraised value of the land under current law of the United States. That's the law. Section 4C of the bill requires the developer to pay full market value for the federal land and minerals within. Under the requirements of this bill, the United States is fully compensated for the copper up front. But if, in fact, this vein is larger than what is anticipated, there is a further provision that says that should it exceed that appraised value, the developer, i.e., the copper mining company, is required to compensate the United States through annual assessments as the market moves forward. The Markey Amendment adds an 8% royalty to the top payment. This would mean that the company would be paying a huge premium in addition to what current law is of the value that they've already paid. I have to tell you, Mr. Chairman, this is unprecedented in any law or any activity regarding mining. This amendment isn't about ensuring the full payment to the United States because that is required in the bill under current law. What this amendment really does is sending a signal to companies that want to invest on federal lands to utilize the resources we have, that they are not welcome in the United States. They are not welcome, and they should go overseas where they are welcome, taking American jobs with them and making us less economically viable as a country and also costing us jobs. So with that, I urge my colleagues to vote no on this amendment, Mr. Chairman, and I reserve my time.
The gentleman from Massachusetts used all of his time, so you need to use yours.
I would yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Flake.
Gentleman from Arizona. 3.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I would just point out that if we want to address the royalty issue on this and other mining ventures, let's address the Mining Act of 1872. There were attempts to do this in the 90s, attempts to increase royalties or impose a 5% royalty, and many on the other side of the aisle opposed that measure. And so there have been a few attempts. I would encourage, let's go back to it. But this is not the place to do it. We can't do it here on this one bill. And make no mistake about it, this is an attempt to kill this legislation, nothing else. It's not an attempt to garner the taxpayer more revenue. This is an attempt to kill the bill. I would encourage rejection of the amendment and adoption of the bill. I yield back.
Gentleman from Washington.
How much time do I have, Mr. Chairman?
2 minutes.
I'm pleased to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Pierce.
Gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Chairman, it is interesting to listen to the arguments. To listen to the arguments that were given just now on why we should support the Markey Amendment, you would believe that Republicans have set up this massive scheme for avoiding payment for royalties. Now, this law has been in place on the books for a very long time, But additionally, I remember that the Democrats were in control for 2 years, House, the Senate, and the White House. And they elected not to pass this royalty bill because they knew it would damage the economy. Like the gentleman from Arizona just said, this is a single attempt to kill this one bill. 25% of the nation's copper needs could be met for the next 50 years, and they're trying to kill the bill. That's what defies explanation. I yield back.
Gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself the balance of the time. I just want to point out the unprecedented nature of this amendment. Now, let's think about it. The gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Flake, properly pointed out that we operate under the 1872 Act, and there's some discussion about that. But to single out one company in one area, in one state, for this tax sends a terrible, terrible signal to our economic system. Because what is sacred, if this were to be passed, what is sacred about this industry compared to any other industry that somebody doesn't like? We'll sponsor an amendment to tax one individual company. Now, boy, that is going to instill confidence, I can really see, in our economic system if an amendment like this is adopted. It is a bad amendment, and it will have a detrimental effect on this project, and I urge defeat of the Markey Amendment, and I yield back my time.
All time for debate on the Markey Amendment has expired. The question is now on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Markey. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Opinion chair, the noes have it. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Chairman, on that, I request the yeas and nays.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Massachusetts will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 3, printed in Part B of House Report 112-258. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona rise?
I have an amendment that's in order under the rule.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 3, printed in Part B of House Report Number 112-258, offered by Mr. Grijalva of Arizona.
Pursuant to House Resolution 444, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Grijalva, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just for clarification of the record, the reform of the Mining Act of 1872 was passed by this House under when the Democrats were in the majority, including the 8% royalty requirement, and met almost unanimous opposition from my Republican colleagues on the other side of the aisle. We have been told that the creation of jobs is the principal motivation and justification for H.R. 1904. But when we examine these job claims, they start to fall apart. We've heard variant figures from 450 initially to 3,700, and sometimes even 6,000, and the numbers aren't supported by the facts. The amendment that we have before the House right now is offered by myself and the gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi, is the only way to ensure that at least some jobs will be created in Arizona as a result of this bill. Our amendment adds conditions to the land exchange to guarantee job creation in the community of Superior, Arizona and the surrounding area, and strengthen the overall benefits to the U.S. economy. Section 1 of this amendment guarantees that the Remote Operations Center is located in Superior. Modern mines, and Rio Tinto in particular, use a range of automation technology. Most of the human labor is done off-site at Remote Operations Center. Rio Tinto is presently operating its Pilbara, Australia mine 800 miles away in Perth, a metro area. Our amendment will ensure that this Remote Operations Center is in Superior and operates from Superior, Arizona. If this legislation is truly about jobs and lifting up the local economy, it is important to guarantee that local residents have access to jobs that are created by this mine. Section 2 of our amendment makes sure that Arizonans are considered first for employment. Without active recruitment and a hiring preference for area residents, how do we know that the residents of the region and Arizona will benefit from the project? Our amendment makes sure that that happens. If the bill is really about jobs and our national interests, then we should guarantee that the ore produced from this mine has a direct impact on the U.S. economy. Section 3 of the amendment will make sure that all raw material extracted from the mine is processed in the United States, not in China or any other foreign country. Finally, Section 4 of this amendment, by ensuring that all equipment in the mine is made in the USA, puts American manufacturers before foreign competitors. If the promise of job creation is to have even a shred of credibility, the Grijalva-Garamendi Amendment must be adopted to assure that the promises we have heard and the guarantees that have been talked about this afternoon are in fact reality, and this amendment would make it a requirement. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose did the gentleman from Washington rise?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I claim time in opposition.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the fundamental purpose of H.R. 1904 is to make copper in the United States and create thousands of American jobs. This amendment is purposely written to make the mine impossible by mandating conditions that can't be achieved. As a result of that, if this were to pass, the 500 people currently employed in the project would lose their jobs, and the 3,700 total jobs that would be created would never materialize. The lead sponsor of this amendment has fought this proposed mine for years. And listen, I respect his position. But this amendment isn't written to improve the bill. It's intended to kill the mine. It is simply an amendment in wolf's clothing. This amendment dictates specific mandates on business operations, Mr. Chairman, that are unrealistic, unprecedented, and unworkable. Let me give you an example. It mandates the precise town in which the mine operations center must be located. The federal government should not be dictating where and only where a company is allowed to conduct its private business. If you take this to the logical extreme, what's next? Will House Democrats push a new law to require Apple to move from Cupertino to where? Detroit? And how ironic that when a company that is investing hundreds of millions of their private dollars in Arizona to create thousands of American jobs, that Democrats in the District of Columbia want to dictate where to operate their business. But on the other hand, there may be some consistency, because when President Obama and House Democrats hand out over $500 million in stimulus dollars to the Fisker car company, they allowed that to be built in Finland, which, Mr. Chairman, I might add, is not even a state. The amendment also requires that all copper produced from this mine be used in the United States. Copper is a basic component used to construct and build items. It's ridiculous to mandate that not 1 ounce of copper goes on any item. It violates this law, this amendment, to be used outside the United States. I'm sensitive to this because I'm from Washington. If a Boeing plane is using copper made from this mine, that Boeing plane can therefore never fly out of the United States. If copper pipe is used in the plumbing of a boat that's built in America, it can never ship American goods in this global economy. And what about copper jewelry, Mr. Chairman? An American-built car that includes copper components or a multitude of other everyday items that we build in America and sell abroad that contains copper. The fact is, this amendment would make it impossible to use the copper from this mine, but on the other hand, that's probably what the intent is. Finally, the amendment mandates that all equipment used to mine or support mining activities be made in the United States. The purpose of the bill is to allow the third largest undeveloped copper resource in the world to be developed in America, to create American jobs and provide up to 25% of America's copper consumption. It defies reason and logic to say that this economic boost to America can't happen if one piece of equipment used for the mine isn't made in the United States. And let me go a little bit further, Mr. Chairman. The word equipment is never defined. Does it include everyday office items that will support mine activities, such as paper or pencils? What about cell phones for workers? iPhones and BlackBerries, I might add, are not manufactured in America. So I urge my colleagues therefore, to vote against this amendment, which stands in the way of American copper production and America copper creation. And with that, I reserve my time.
Reserves his time. The chair would just ask the gentleman from Washington for clarity of the record. Did you mean an amendment in sheep's clothing, not an amendment in wolf's clothing?
Whichever the interpretation, I'm speaking to you, and you're interpreting what I'm saying.
Got it. Gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, and let me yield to the co-sponsor of the amendment, Mr. Garamendi from California, for balance of the time. 2 minutes.
Gentleman's recognized.
Our worthy chairman has put up a dozen canards to address the underlying issue here. This amendment is a very simple one that would locate in Arizona the headquarters for this mine. Is there something wrong with that? I'm not moving this off to Finland. Come on. This amendment would also provide that the copper, and it's been stated by the proponents of the bill, that 25% of the copper needs in the United States would come from this mine. So why not use this copper in the United States? Seems to me to be perfectly reasonable, despite all the canards that were just tossed around here a few moments ago. The other part of this has to do with the equipment. Does the worthy gentleman from Washington oppose to using American-made equipment in American mines? Is that what this is all about? Yes, there may be some definitional problems. I'd be delighted to work with you on the definitional problem, but the underlying point here is why would we set up all of this so that we could import equipment from China or Japan or some other place? Why not simply require that this mine, which under the bill itself is an enormous giveaway of American property, a property owned by the American people, an enormous, unparalleled giveaway of our value, why not simply require that at least, if they're going to be given all of this, they be required to buy American-made equipment for the mine operation? What's wrong with that? Why not make it in America? If this mine's in America, why not use American-made men and American-made equipment and hire American, and in this case, Arizonans? You got a problem with hiring Arizonans? You got a problem with locating in Arizona the headquarters of this mine, or would you prefer London or maybe somewhere in Australia? Come on. These are very simple amendments so that Americans can go to work. These are very simple amendments so that we will buy so that this company will buy American-made equipment to mine our copper, which under your proposal is given away. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman, all time controlled by the gentleman from Arizona has expired. The gentleman from Washington has a minute left.
A minute and a half?
No, one. Just one.
1 minute.
1 minute.
In that case, I will yield myself the balance of the time. I just want to respond to my good friend from California about working with us if there's a flaw in this amendment. I just remind him, he offered a similar amendment in committee. We brought up precisely the same arguments, and here we are, we trot out an amendment on the floor of the House, and it's precisely the same amendment. I just don't, you know, I have a hard time thinking that somebody wants to work with us when they trot out the same amendment with the same arguments, got defeated twice. And I just want to mention this, Mr. Chairman. It's a worthy goal to buy America and to promote buying America, but not when that sentiment is used to block a project, to create American jobs, and that results in America being less dependent on foreign minerals that gets our economy going. So, Mr. Chairman, I urge a defeat of this amendment. With that, I yield back my time.
All time for debate on the Grijalva amendment has expired. The question now occurs on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Grijalva. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Gentleman from Arizona.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask for a recorded vote.
Gentleman asks for a recorded vote pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee to now rise.
Question is on the motion to rise. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and accordingly the committee rises.
Just say Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and then Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee of the Whole House in the State of the Union has had under consideration H.R. 1904, and pursuant to House Resolution 444, I report the bill back to the House with an amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, I have a new report. The Committee of the Whole House in the State of the Union, having had under consideration H.R. 1904, directs me to report that it has come to no resolution thereon.
The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House of the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration H.R. 1904 and has come to no resolution thereon. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the House will stand in recess subject to the call of the Chair, not earlier than 3:30 p.m.
The House has been debating an Arizona land swap bill which would create the largest copper mine in the country and expand the